leadership isn't really about creating more versions of yourself. It's about knowing who's on the court with me, how to bring out the best in them. And that seems obvious, but when you're in consulting in your entire 20s and you're forced to compete and be the best at everything, you do not learn these things. And you don't learn them from men around you. And you actually learn, to your point, the exact opposite. And I had to tailor my approach, not to lower the bar, but to make sure we were all aligned on how to reach it. And I think that shift made me a better leader, a better teammate. I think I had to undo a lot of the leadership philosophy I found in the men around me, because that wasn't working for me, and that wasn't working for my team. And so that was a really hard lesson. But I think if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't be the person I am today.
Welcome to the She's So Sweet podcast, where we interview accomplished women who have worked their way to the C-suite. I'm your host, Kristi Faltorusso, Chief Customer Officer and award-winning customer success executive. I am really excited for our guest today. I've got my friend here today with us, Natalie Wolf, who's a CCO at People.ai. I love having a CCO on the show. So Natalie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
All right, well, listen, before we get into all the good stuff, we've got to lay some foundation for our listeners. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about you, about your role, about People.ai, just so everyone knows who you are, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, awesome. Again, thanks for having me. I'm the CCO at People.ai, so I lead customer success, support consulting, and the supporting cast. I have a background in finance transformation and over 15 years scaling post-sales teams at companies like Anaplan and Salonis. I'm your CS change agent. You call me when you want to hire a true operator, you want to create clarity out of chaos, and operationalize customer success at scale. So I call myself the witch doctor of customer success.
I love
Outside of
that.
work, I'm a proud mom to a curious 5-year-old and a mom to a very, very bougie labradoodle. He is way more bougie than my daughter. And a huge fan of laminated checklists. I don't want to show anyone my cabinets. They're very, very scary. And then as a fun side hustle, I'm an aerobics instructor. So fun fact, I've been teaching fitness classes for like over 22 years now. So I will never give up on that until my legs give up.
Okay, Natalie, I almost want just everything you just highlighted there personally to be the episode, and I almost don't even want to get into the business stuff, but I got to double click into two things here. The aerobics exercise instructor. Like,
Yep.
what kind of classes are you talking? Because the minute I hear aerobics in my head, it sends me right back to like Jane Fonda and Jazzercise. So
Yes.
that is what I'm envisioning. Okay. I got Richard Simmons images floating around here. What exactly are we
Well,
talking? I know it's not sweating to the oldies.
yeah, but I teach cycling now, but I used to teach a lot, like when step was cool.
Yep.
Step was really hot in early 2000s, early 90s. I taught a lot of step classes, and I do like boot camp classes or hit training. I used to do that a lot, but now that I do my tech thing, I only do one class a week, which is cycling, because I'm a serious cyclist. So that's really fun. And then I get to yell at people on Sunday, and then I get to come back to work on Monday like nothing happened, and everything's good. So you're like, oh, why is she so cheery? Because I just yelled at people for like a couple hours. It's fine.
I love that. So how did you get into that?
Well, when I was, it was like my job at when I was in college. It was like a really
Okay.
to make money. I was a trainer, personal trainer, was a fitness instructor, and I loved doing it. I would teach like 100-person classes at CU Boulder. It was super fun. They had like an entire gymnasium of like boot camp classes, step classes. So it was a really fun thing that I did. And I just always promised myself, even as a traveling consultant, that I would keep it up. I used to teach at like the David Barton gym in New York, like the OG, like super cool David Barton gym.
Yeah.
That was super fun. But yeah, I've just always promised myself I would keep it up.
I love that. I love that commitment to yourself too. And it's obviously a passion that translates and probably serves you well even professionally, right? I'm sure there's bits and pieces you take with your fitness career and just your passion around it. Okay, now the other thing I had to double click into, you said curious 5-year-old. Like when people describe their children, there's a lot of words that are used. You chose that very specifically. Tell me a little bit about your curious 5-year-old.
Well, I think she's going to be president one day.
Love that
However,
for us.
which is making me insane. But she so wants to know all the things about everything. And my husband is also very curious like myself. So I think we've really fostered this. We want her to ask questions, why this, why that? And she's just constantly looking to solve problems. And I just love that about her. I feel like I see that in her and I want to foster that. And, she will be president one day, but it'll be a pain in my ass until then.
Well, I love that. I'm excited to follow her journey. So we'll follow your journey, but I'm also excited to see where this takes her. Very good. Well, listen, I I always say like I have to make this assumption and I hate to make assumptions, but I'm generally going to make it anyway. I don't believe that when you were little, like little Natalie didn't dream of becoming a CCO because, well,
No.
for obvious reasons, right? Like this didn't even exist when we were little.
Yep.
But what did you think you were gonna be? Like, what were you aspiring to be? So when you were your curious 5-year-old self, or as early back as you can remember, what'd you
Yeah.
think you were gonna do?
Yeah. Like you said, like I didn't dream of customer success or financial consulting transformation. I don't think I was like, I really want to transform the way Pfizer does their financial statements. Like, I didn't think that, right? So, I wanted to be a physical therapist, like someone who could really help people heal, help people move better and regain their strength, which is probably why I've kept up this fitness instruction thing.
Right.
But even earlier than that, I really wanted to be a spy.
Oh my
I
gosh, stop.
was obsessed with Harriet the Spy, the book by Louise Fitzhugh. I'd carry around my little black and white notebook writing around observations about like people around my neighborhood, making sense of patterns. I was always first to know the scoop of what was happening in my neighborhood, and just really trying to understand the world around me. Weirdly, I was just going through a bin in my parents' house, and they had all my little black and white notebooks for like thousands of.
Stop.
And I was like, "Why would you keep these? Why?" But like looking back, it actually makes perfect sense. Like customer success and consulting at its core is really about understanding people deeply, what they need, what's working, what's not, and kind of helping them move forward. So that observation, connection, and transformation, like just like Harriet, I've always been drawn to the why behind people's actions, why do people make certain decisions. And I think curiosity is powerful. If I look at every person I hire, I look for that curiosity. And I think transformation starts with this. And if we're willing to observe with empathy and act with intention, like we can create really lasting change, which is, I think, what I try to strive to do in customer success every day. But again, did not know that that would my Harriet the Spy love and my love for fitness would kind of bring me here, you know?
Okay, so I have so many questions, Natalie. We only have 60 minutes. Okay, so I definitely get the Harriet the Spy thing. Okay, that translates. I also think it's very funny. You are not my first spy on this podcast. So for what's that, whatever that's worth. But you're not my first spy. I think you might be the second, but you're not my first. Okay. But the physical therapist, like, did that come from anything specific? Like, was somebody in your family a physical therapist? Did you see a physical therapist? I see oftentimes when we're that young, we want to be what we can see, right? Or we're inspired like you were by your book. Was there some inspiration behind that or something that was a driving motivator behind a physical therapist? Or did you have an injury and you had to work with a physical therapist? Anything there?
No, it's funny, like, I didn't have a lot of that in my family, but I did always wanna help people. Like, I was always wanting to, like, help others and solve problems and, like, be a helpful steward. There was, a lot of help needed in my family and support needed for different relatives and others, and I think that led me to, like, wanna physically help heal people. And I think I do that through, like, laughter now. I do that a lot through, like, just being part of my community when I teach cycling, like, I feel like I'm part of the community, I'm helping people, like, they are not really understanding that they can do things that they did not think was possible. That is a super fun feeling for me. And I think that in customer success too, I think that all has like a storyline that is connected. So not really anyone in my family per se, but my grandmother was a huge tennis player. She was
Hmm.
super physically fit. She would always be doing these step aerobics classes actually. And she would let me come with her. I'd come to like her Bally's Fitness, which is like a Chicago
Yeah.
gym, cute little spot, and I would come and sit in the sidelines and wait for my grandmother to be done with her step classes, and I was just like, "This is super cool." So, I was like an early access step club member.
I love that. I did Lucille Roberts, which was
Oh,
local for me,
oh yeah. Oh,
as, like, a female gym, and, like, they were
oh hell yeah.
big on these classes,
I know.
and the outfits I wore,
Oh yeah. And my grandmother was a great dresser, so she was fabulously dressed up until the day she died. I mean, she like gave me all of her leather pants where I was like, these will not fit me, but let's go. You know what I mean? Let's go.
I love that. I love that. My nana did not have the same fashion sense as your grandmother, it sounds. We probably a little different. I'm glad she did not leave me any of her muumuus, because they were not cute, not stylish, and I thankfully do not fit into those for different reasons.
Yeah, totally. I totally get that. But yeah, she was so fashionable. Every time I saw her, she was also a hairdresser. Every time I saw her, she was had like a different hair color, and I was like, "Let's go! It's
I
red today."
love that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love that. Oh my gosh. Okay, so good. All right, well listen, we're gonna try to bring it back. I'm not good at this because I would take this, like I said, 20 different directions. But for our listeners who do listen for very specific reasons, let's chat about your career journey because obviously it's been super impressive. You've had a lot of different changes and pivots along the way. So let's take a minute. Let's talk about those specifically. So when you reflect back on your journey, you've had some changes. You even kind of talk about this career pivot that you've made. What were some of those big pivotal moments that you feel like really contributed to your ascent to the C-suite?
yeah. That's a great question. There wasn't one single moment where I suddenly knew I was on the path, you know? But looking back, I think of a few pivotal decisions and relationships really made all the difference. I think one of my most significant turning points in my career was during my tenure at Anaplan. It wasn't really in a formal leadership role when I started transforming our customer journey, but I saw a lot of gaps. We had great technology, but we didn't always show customers how to get the most out of it. And I started building out what would become our customer success organization and our customer experience transformation, not because I was asked to, but because it felt like the right thing to do. And we started mapping the customer journey, identifying friction points, proposing changes that could really make impact. But there was no real team. It was just me and an incredibly amazing C1 customer first committee, some ideas, and knowing where all the bodies were buried. You know, it was a risk in some ways because I was operating outside the bounds of my role. But I was lucky to have a lot of advocates who saw value. Frank, our CEO at the time, he noticed. And I had huge advocates in sales, you know, Dennis, Paul, many others. They leaned in and gave me runway to lead more boldly. And my CCO really mentored me closely, not just like refining my strategy, but helped me bring my ideas to life. It was the first time in my career where, you know, someone let me exercise my creativity so boldly. And, you know, in consulting, you can't be bold. You're like, you have to fit a mold. And I think just letting me exercise that free reign and help me bring my ideas to life, you know, was really, really impactful. And this wasn't just typical journey mapping, right? I took, you know, service design principles and journey mapping and made people feel and experience what our customers felt. I brought customers in, partners in, and you didn't get to escape the sessions with me without having a list of to-dos. But it's as if you are now pumped or excited to change. I mentioned at the beginning of this, being the witch doctor of customer success. Like, that's kind of what I became. If you had an issue with incident management, you had a problem on our website, you called me and I would work with your team to solve through the issues, transform, and act. And, you know, remember, I was a consultant for 10 years, which
Yep.
definitely shaped the way I approach problem solving and supporting people to execution. But I wasn't allowed to be bold in consulting. And in fact, even though I operate at the top of the bell-shaped curve, a very important measuring stick as a consultant, I was always getting myself into trouble. Like, I was always in trouble.
Right.
I was too close to customers. I was too bold. Back then, you know, I even got in trouble for wearing maroon tights at a customer site. We're just not allowed to do that.
So
um,
none of the leather pants that grandma gave us made it to any of those meetings,
Oh, they did,
sadly.
but
Okay.
no leather pants. But I mean, like, even like these simple things, there
Yeah.
was just no women to look up to. You know, in
Mhm.
finance, all my bosses and a majority of people around me were men. And I know these are back in the early 2000 problems, but I never really fit in. And I was forcing myself to fit into a role because I wanted to make partner. I wanted to move up. There is a exercise in consulting every 2 years. You want to get promoted. And I was just chasing something that wasn't the real me. So once I left those traditional views behind, made the jump into tech, which is where I kind of found my journey at Anaplan. And I found something where I can be more creative, reach customers where they are. And then I really flourished. And I think the concept of bringing the customer journey to fruition taught me that the path to the C-suite isn't about waiting for permission. It's kind of about, for me, seeing what's broken, imagining something better, and then just having the courage to act, even if no one asked you to. And I think that was a really big part of why I've been so successful. But I didn't do it alone. I had mentors who opened doors, leaders who believe in me, and then teammates who executed alongside me. That combination of like self initiative and community support was everything.
So, what made you make the decision to move from consulting into tech? Like, what was that? Because I know what it was for my journey, but I'm curious to hear like
Yeah.
how you made that pivot.
Yeah, I just saw like it wasn't working. Like I might have been performing, but I was always just feeling like there was a big gaping hole in my heart of like this just doesn't feel right. Like it's too painful, it's too hard. I'm trying too hard and it just didn't feel natural. And so I had this amazing experience where the last 2 years of my consulting career at Deloitte, I was helping Google transform their entire way that they were doing financial planning. It was a huge project that I was spearheading, and I started to get more involved in tech. And I was like, I got so close to the people I worked with. Google was my home. I felt like I was more of a Google employee than Deloitte employee. And I started to really be like, there is a path outside of consulting that I did not know. And I grew up in the Midwest, right? My parents didn't, they didn't go to college. They came from really traditional Midwest roots. I didn't know that there were other paths
Yep.
than, finance, being in finance or being in consulting. So for me, I was like, you know what? Let's just try something new, I think, and see if it works. And I uniquely had this opportunity when I was at Deloitte to start thinking about other financial planning tools. And Anaplan at the same time was growing as a company. There were less than 20 million, under 200 employees, and they asked me to join them. And that was like the perfect combination of my skill sets and my interests. And I was like, let's just give something a go because this is just, I don't care about this path anymore. It's just not working.
I love that you made that pivot. Obviously, you've been successful in it. What was the hardest part about making that change?
I think making that change was giving up old beliefs and giving up, the way you thought your life or your trajectory was going to go. I think, I was like, okay, every 2 years promoted up to partner, that's the path. Like I just was so dead set on
Yep.
following the path. And so once giving that up and saying, "Hey, I don't have to be that person. It's okay to switch." And really it had to do with me, like just letting go of these like preconceived notions about what success is. And I left to just actually started at Anaplan as in pre-sales as a pre-sales solutions consultant. So I believe everyone should actually hold a bag or be in sales at one point in their career, but I just changed the way of thinking of what success means. What does success mean to me? And changing that notion.
So, something you talked about when you were talking about your time in consulting was being the only female. And that
Mm,
seems to be a theme, I think that comes up with a lot of our guests, is that they talk about these moments in time in their career where they were the only female, right? And having an absence of a female leader in front of them who is kind of forging the way and who's setting the stage for what they should look like or how they should show up. How do you feel like that absence contributed to any experiences you had while you were in consulting?
mm. Well, you are expected to just be as tough as a man and as stern and as hard. And you grow up like learning that's the way to operate, right? So like I didn't really operate with a lot of empathy, to be honest, because I saw what it took to be good, and it was being tough. It was being stern. But then there was no shape for that as a woman to be tough but fair or respectful through that process, and then judged for being that tough, and then judged for saying, you are too tough, you are too, you are bitchy, you are all these things to people. and you were held to a different standard, but that was the only thing you knew how to do. Like, to be a manager, to be a coach, to be a great leader, you are expected to do these things just like men are, but then held to a completely different standard of how you should operate. Because as soon as you are seen like that, it completely changes. And so I thought that I didn't have any woman around to show me a different path. And I thought that that was actually the only acceptable way to operate, which I learned later, and we can talk about later. But I think I learned that that was actually not the best way, but it was the only way that I knew that to be great.
It's funny, and I asked that very specifically because obviously I'm gonna take this somewhere and you'll see where I'm going with it. This is not uncommon, right? And so for many women, right, depending on kind of where your career started, right, how far back, that was the experience a lot of us shared. And I always talk about that, right? The reason why I even started this podcast was obviously this is a gift and a legacy to my daughter in hopes that she will listen to it at some point and reflect and kind of see and share the experiences and stories of women, great women leaders who have come before her. But similar to you, I didn't have any female leaders to emulate. And
Yeah.
so I emulated the behaviors of men. And like you, it only contributed to my points of failure, right? Because to you, like to your point, right, being held to a different standard. Then what happened was I wasn't able to let go of those behaviors, right? It wasn't like, okay, great. I found myself in environments working under women. Unfortunately for me, those women, because they were probably more tenured, older, had the same experiences and were also emulating the behaviors of men. And so even though they were a woman, they weren't behaving any differently than the men I had worked under. And so I was still getting the same treatment, but it showed up differently. And so my behaviors didn't shift until later in my career. And it took me a lot of time and a lot of pain, I'm sure to those even who have worked with me, for me, around me, to let go of those behaviors, to rethink and to understand what it looks like to be empathetic, to listen, to care, to show up with all of those attributes in the workplace. Because I just
Yeah.
didn't have that level of empathy, right? It was like, no, you work hard, you don't complain, you do what you're told, you execute, and like
Yes.
that's how you show up. And you'll get promoted when you do all of those things, not before. There's no timeline. Like you don't ask, you'll be given. Um, and it took me a long time to, like, rewire my brain to let
Yes.
go of all of that. And
Yeah.
I always reflect back on my leadership journey almost enough to the point of tears when I think about how those who worked under me, with me, around me, like I said, for many years early in my leadership journey, who probably struggled as a result of that.
Yes, absolutely. And, that goes back to rising to the top doesn't come without some battle scars, and I think I've always approached my career like an athlete, super intense, discipline, and for what it's all or nothing mentality. I don't know if you've seen that video where Eric Schmidt, the Google CEO, talks about Steve Jobs around divas. Like, they're passionate, they raise the bar, they raise expectations, but they're relentless and they are pains in the ass. I am that person. And if I had to put it in basketball terms, because I love basketball, I had Michael Jordan problems. And I'm not talking about like Michael Jordan, 15 million, his $15 million yacht sailing around Croatia. Yes, I am stalking it. I am stalking him. But I was I wanted to win so badly, and I only had the emulation of the men around me who wanted to win so badly and how they acted, what made them successful. But I was also so maniacally focused on solving top problems for our customers, and I expected everyone else to want it just as badly,
Right.
to pay through the pain, or to play through the pain, put in the extra hours, study the film, and bring their A game every day. And if you were on my team, it wasn't always easy. I pushed really hard. I had a high expectations. I still do. And look, I rolled up my sleeves and worked just as hard, sometimes harder. And I was never asking anyone to do something I wouldn't do myself. And I think that, over time, people will come back and say, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm so grateful. You prepared me for what came next. I get texts like that all the time. But here's the thing. Not everyone wants to be Michael Jordan. Some
Right.
people want to be Steve Kerr. Some people want to come off the bench and play their role beautifully. And I had to learn that really greatness doesn't always look like my version of it. And that was a really hard lesson. Back to this point is like my natural instinct was to push harder when something wasn't working and like put pressure on people because that was the way it worked in finance. That was the way it worked in consulting. And I had no other way to operate. So to your
Yep.
point, hex for undoing some of the leadership style and culture and values, because I started realizing leadership isn't really about creating more versions of yourself. It's about knowing who's on the court with me, how to bring out the best in them. And that seems obvious, but when you're in consulting in your entire 20s and you're forced to compete and be the best at everything, you do not learn these things. And you don't learn them from men around you. And you actually learn, to your point, the exact opposite. And I had to develop empathy. I had to express myself differently, tailor my approach, not to lower the bar, but to make sure we were all aligned on how to reach it. And I was not capable early on to celebrate assists as much as points. And I had to really learn that the hard way. And I think that shift made me a better leader, a better teammate. And I'm still working on slowing down. That's my New York spirit. But I think I had to undo a lot of the leadership philosophy I found in the men around me, because that wasn't working for me. And that wasn't working for my team. And so that was a really hard lesson. But I think if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't be the person I am today. And I'm really thankful that I had the experience, or had the ability to experience that earlier. Because if I was doing that right now, I probably would just really have a lot of failure points.
It's tough. It's a tough journey for, I think, females in particular, right? Who have real ambition around their career and have a strong desire to be successful, because so many of us have those shared experiences, right? And so not only are we setting the bar very high for ourselves, but
Yeah.
we're also in parallel trying to undo and relearn, right? It's the whole idea of like building the plane while you're flying it. It's like we're such works in progress because there's so much that we have to undo, but at the same time, we reflect back on it and say, but yeah, but if I didn't have that experience, if I didn't do that, I wouldn't actually be in the position I am today to have the privilege to have to undo all of that, right?
Yes.
Because where we
Best.
are is a privilege, right? Like we're sitting in these roles, and part of our success is attributed to those experiences. So I'm kind of always at odds with it, right? Where it's like I want to resent it and I want to hate it and I want to talk poorly about the experiences I had. But at the same time, how can I? Because without all of that, would I have ever been in a position to be where I am today? Probably not.
Absolutely, I agree, and, I think, that grittiness, that resiliency makes you better for it. You know, I wouldn't wish it on maybe other people, I wouldn't wish it on my daughter. I think the
Oh, I
experiences
definitely wouldn't wish
I
on
had
my daughter.
100%, and I don't think I'd wish some of the experiences I had in consulting. It was really tough, but I also am great at what I do today because of a lot of the amazing principles that are instilled in you, and the way you can be curious and help people and do all these amazing things that tie back to like my values and the things I've always wanted to do. So to your point, you create a resiliency. I would not regret it for anything because it's made me who I am today.
I love that. All right. Well, we're all works in progress. And I think all I ever do is I go back and I reflect. I apologize to those that maybe didn't get the best version of me early in my career. And I just hope that they don't hate me. Um, Sorry, guys. All right. Well, listen. One of the things I always say about successful women is that we do set the bar high. We're always focused on the next goal in front of us, and as a result, we don't take the time to reflect and celebrate our successes. Right? Because by the time we hit that goal, we are running through it onto the next milestone that we are trying to hit. And so I like to be the forcing function to make everyone slow down and pause and reflect for a second. Because obviously, yes, you had a lot of challenges that got you to where you are. You've navigated, you've pivoted a lot, but you also had tremendous success. So,
Mm.
if you had to think back on your career, what are the things that you look back at and you're like, yeah, I did that? Or what are the things that you were like the most proud about that have been a part of your story in a big way?
Yeah. Isn't it funny? We just we execute, we celebrate for a minute and then we move right on. Like
I
that
don't
is
know that I've
just
ever spent any great amount of time talking about anything I've accomplished.
yeah, no, it's funny like that. You just want to win and move. And I would say my proudest moment probably wasn't one big splashy win. I've just been really proud of all the transformation across companies I've been able to do. My one goal in a company is to be aligned to my values, and that is to leave everything better than I found it. When I joined Anaplan, we had no customer success. We were under 200 people and under 20 million in revenue. Customers weren't seeing clear outcomes. The post-sale experience felt disconnected from the business value we promised. And the same is true at many other post orgs I've joined. And, rolling up my sleeves, building a new model from scratch, one rooted in data and outcomes and operational rigor is something I'm really proud about. But more importantly, building that culture, mentoring new leaders, watch a lot of the junior team members grow into confident operators and really refine what it meant to be a strategic partner to our customers. And we saw the difference in customer experience and in revenue and how we operated. When I left Anaplan, we had over 2,000 customers, over 200 million in revenue. It was a blast and a hard ride, but I'm so proud of what we built together. And I feel the same for every startup I've been part of, leaving it better than I found it, not just with our customers, but employees and teams. And that's a huge win and an achievement that I'm proud of. More importantly, there's nothing more rewarding than hearing from a teammate years later who says, "Thanks for pushing me. You saw something in me before I saw it in myself." Those messages and the impact it has on these people and our customers are really the moments I'm the most proud of and I carry with me. I just got a text from one of my employees at Anaplan a couple weeks ago that was like, "I just nailed my presentation with the CEO. It was because of you. No one gave me those skills." And I was thinking, I was so hard on her. Like, I was just like, "You will do this. You will do this. There's an operating rhythm to presenting, and I want you to get it right." And she probably at the time was like, "Why is she so maniacally focused on
Right.
helping me?" But I feel so proud that I could be that person for her when it's time for her to have that opportunity, she is ready. And that to me is like the biggest accomplishment that I could ever have.
I think that leaders sometimes forget that. We lose sight of it because I gotta tell you, like, I had a journey for 5.5 years under a leader who was former McKinsey. So that was my version of getting the consulting experience was working under him. And I
Yeah.
have to tell you, like, I may have cried more days than I didn't, over 5.5 years. Definitely cried, like, regularly. It was, like, a daily thing. Like, he would text me and, like, the visceral reaction I would have, like, of the anxiety that would just, like, choke me in that moment. Um, and he was hard on me, and he critiqued me, and everything felt like I was not good enough and I was not worthy. And I gotta tell you, like, years later, probably some therapy, um, I can reflect back and say, I got my PhD in customer success working under that man. He
Mhm.
taught me more in 5.5 years than I will ever learn in a lifetime. He taught me to be resilient. He taught me to strive for excellence. He taught me what excellence looked like. He taught me that operating rhythm. He built so much that he probably doesn't even realize how much I've learned from him, even though I still tell him now. I cringe a little less when he texts me these days, but, like, we are still in touch, and I cry less. But I do try to express to him the gratitude, but it's true. Like, some of the hardest leaders that you'll have, the ones that you want to leave, the ones that you cry about, sadly, right? If they care so much to be that hard on you, it's because they see something in you. Maybe their execution isn't what you want, but sometimes it's what you need. And
Yes.
I feel like had I not had that experience, as tough as it was, and if I had not stuck it out for 5.5 years, I would have shortchanged myself. I would not have learned as much. I would not have grown as much. I would not be where I am today without that. And
Yes.
so your story just reminded me of that because it's a similar experience, right? So I was your employee and I can understand what it's like to reflect back years later and feel the impact of something that felt so uncomfortable in the moment.
Totally. And, it's just I'm so proud of like the best gift I can give to one of my team members is to let them go fly and do something bigger and greater. And I always will come back and there's a whole bunch of people who, I'm proud that they'll come back and say, "Hey, can I work for you again?" And I'm like, "You don't need to work for me. You need a bigger job. You need to like, let me go help you find another role that's bigger than this." Like I am just constantly striving to make them great. And I think that's about empowering the women around you, but I do believe that like that makes you who you are today, and that's really special.
I love that. Okay, well, listen, you
Yeah.
already kind of like segued to my next question here, which is, you and I have shared this, but like I love the saying, I know you do too, empowered women empower women. And now your kind of success story there just talked about one example, but how do you think about empowering other women, especially as they have ambition to take on leadership roles, right? Like what is kind of your commitment to them and helping grow this our future female leaders?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that saying too. It's not just a motto. I think that's a responsibility that we should take really seriously. But I'm pretty intentional about mentorship inside my organization. If you are working for me, women or not, I make sure every one of my leaders, especially the women, has a strong mentor or advocate. And when they don't, I find them one. So, when you work for me that each person on my team will have a mentor, because I've seen firsthand how the right manager in the right environment and the right support can unlock someone's full potential. And empowering women means lifting them up before they ask, opening the doors before they knock, and making sure they thrive in rooms where they might have otherwise felt invisible. And I think that's how we pay it forward. That's how we change the game.
I love that.
Yeah.
Now, is there anything that you are involved in, any organizations, any groups, anything that you're doing outside of your organization to contribute to that also?
Yeah, I think not just there's the work stuff, right? Which is, making sure I'm mentoring, I do a lot of advisory, cool. But I also am really involved in our community. Like there's a really great group here, A Precious Child, that actually gives a lot of donations to women who are trying to get back into the workforce, get into jobs in the workforce, helping them supply clothes and other things for women
Love
who
that.
need to do their first interview. So I try to be really specific about the things I want to get involved in, because I think I can make higher impact. Like I think about that, again, my my 2x2, like highest impact effort, like these are the things that like I can actually make real impact is giving every person in my team a mentor. Like that is a huge win for me is if they're getting more empowerment job, not just from me from a safe space. And then outside of that, finding a couple organizations I can work with where I feel like I can directly one-on-one drive impact with people, leaders, women, in our community.
I love that. I'm always very inspired by hearing what all of my guests kind of share is like what drives them to kind of give back and where they focus their time and effort because, all of my guests, similar to you, we're not, we're busy. We're very busy people. And so to be so intentional and so selfless about giving time back to helping other women, I just love it. I'm so inspired by it. So I love to hear what you're doing there. Now, in the spirit of that, the other thing that I think comes up a lot is balance or this
Yeah.
idea that there is balance. I don't know. And everyone's got a different take on it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear yours, right? Because you talked about having a daughter and a dog and a partner and a career and hobbies and all of these things. So how do you make it work, right? What is your operating system? How do you make yourself feel balanced in a way that enables you to do all these things and show up in all those ways?
Yeah. It's funny because when I was just, like thinking through what we would talk about, last night I'm getting ready for a huge customer training, like right after this. And I was telling our operations person, oh yeah, I have a podcast tomorrow. She said, what? You're crazy. Like we have 3 other big things today. Like, how are you doing this morning? And I'm like, I really do enjoy it, but I don't think of it as balance as much as harmony. To me, it's kind of being fully present, intentional with whatever I'm doing, whether that's leading a board meeting, reading a bedtime story to my daughter, or going for a bike ride. Like there are times I work at night after my little one goes to bed, and that's okay because when I'm with her, I'm all in. Phone's
Yep.
down, distractions off, like I'm fully in, and I really protect that time fiercely. And that probably goes the same for my health. I've learned that if I'm not in balance physically, like I'm a crazy person. Like if I'm
Yeah.
not eating well, moving my body, getting sleep, I really can't show up fully at work or at home. Like I am an insane person if I don't get to lift some weights. So I I do treat that as non-negotiable.
Yep.
Um, and to me, it's not really about perfection. Like some days are chaotic. However, over time, I've developed rituals and boundaries that really allow me to be who I want to be. And it's less about dividing time evenly and it's more about being more intentional. Like it's less about dividing time evenly and more about living intentionally. And that mindset has really helped me like sustain energy, focus, and like bring joy. And then there's one other thing. I think I've undergone like a lot of therapy, but also deep soul searching with a coach to determine my core values. I think it's important when we talk about boundaries, you first know your core values. You write them on paper, you have someone help you find out who you are, what they are. And I repeat this exercise every year to check in, and I won't sacrifice these. So if I exit a company, it's probably because I did the job I was supposed to do and now we're misaligned on our values. And that's okay because I won't budge on these. And I think it's a good call to action that you can't really set boundaries and know what you're balancing if you don't know who you are. And I've had the benefit of, making all these mistakes to finally get here, but I really won't sacrifice some of my core values. And when I look for a new job, when I look for a role, when I look for people, I want to make sure that they're aligned to the values, or else we're just going to have a mismatch and
Yeah.
we won't flourish the way we're supposed to.
I love that. I similar to you, I think it's really important to have those non-negotiables and also to kind of figure out what that harmony looks like. Because I've had people ask all the time, like, how do you do it all? And to your point, right? Like, I make it work, but every day looks different for me because every day
Yep.
has a different set of priorities for that day. Now, I still have, like you, my fitness, my health, my family. Like those things will always have space in my day, right? Whether
Yes.
those boxes are bigger or smaller, that's fine,
Yes.
but those boxes will always be there. What happens in the other time, right? Like that is ever changing based on our day, right? Like and what shows up at work. So I do love your thoughts on that. I've never had a leader on here say that there is such thing as balance. So it seems like everyone's in the same mindset of like you've got to figure out your priorities, your values, as you kind of put it today, and then making that work harmoniously for you. Well,
Yep.
I love that. I've loved your story, but now I want us to reflect one more time before we wrap up today. So, when you think about all the advice, all the stories that you've shared with us, what is the one thing you want to leave our listeners with before we wrap up?
Hmm. If there's one thing I hope people can take away, it's this: you don't need permission to lead. I'm sure my team is sick of hearing me tell them to step into their power. Like it's like disgusting to them. They're like, oh, here we go. Um, but some of the most defining moments in my career came from me seeing a problem, choosing to solve it, even when no one asked me to do that. I didn't wait for the job title. I didn't wait for the perfect plan. I didn't wait for someone else to take the lead. I just started. So whether you're early in your career or already in the C-suite, the opportunity to lead is always there. It's right in front of you. And I think it's about showing up with intention, doing the hard things and lifting others as you rise. And for the women listening, especially in tech, you don't need to fit someone else's mold of leadership. You can make your own playbook. You can own your own voice and know it's not only okay to lead differently. I think it's exactly what we need right now. I think it's what the tech industry needs. And I think we all could benefit from that.
I love that. I think it's such sage advice and a great way for us to wrap up our episode today, Natalie. So thank you so much for taking the time. It sounds like you've got a lot on your calendar for today. So I do appreciate you gifting us some time to record and share your story. I'm always inspired by hearing all that you've accomplished and all that you do. But I just want to express my gratitude not only for me, but for all of our listeners who I am sure learned a ton today.
Oh, thank you. It was so lovely being with you. I've had so much fun and again, grateful for this experience.
Oh, I love that, Natalie. Well, listen, for our listeners, if you've enjoyed our episode, you've made it this far, please rate and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe on YouTube, connect with us both on LinkedIn. Natalie's links will be there. And then again, we'll see you on our next episode. Thanks so much.
Hi, guys. I want to share a bit about an organization that I support called Wednesday Women. They're on a mission to increase the visibility of executive women leaders that you should know, learn from, and be inspired by. On LinkedIn, they share the profile of two amazing women each week, on Wednesdays, of course. And now just imagine if we all followed, amplified, and nominated the women that we want to see more of. Their initiative provides examples of women CEOs, founders, sales executives, technical leaders, and so many more. By supporting Wednesday Women, you'll see more of these professionals in your social feeds, of course, but also on stages, podcasts, and panels. If you're interested in learning more and supporting their initiative, head over to www.wednesdaywomen.org or follow them on LinkedIn.